He watched his father die. He watched his family scatter and fall and be erased from the world as though they had never existed. He watched his friends, the people he had bled beside, trained beside, and people who trusted him to be strong enough, cut down one by a force so overwhelming that resistance was not courage, it was delusion. The man who took everything from him was not a villain in any conventional sense. He was simply the strongest, Hwa Moogi, the everlasting martial god, a man who decided the martial world would be unified, and then made it so because no one alive could stop him. And Geom Mugeuk, the Unrivalled Swordsman, second son of the heavenly demon, stood in the wreckage of his entire life with nothing left to protect, nothing left to fight for, nothing left at all except a single burning certainty. He would go back. He would return to the beginning, and this time he would know. This is absolute regression, and it is not about power. It is about knowing. Welcome back to the Manhwa Recap Vault. Regression manhwa is one of the most popular subgenres on the platform, and for good reason. There is something fundamentally satisfying about watching someone who has lived through hell return to the start with the knowledge to change everything. But the best regression stories understand that knowledge is not the same thing as strength, and absolute regression understands this better than almost anything in the genre. Let me show you why. To understand what Geom Mugeuk becomes, you must first understand what he was. He was the second son of the heavenly demon. In the martial world of this manhwa, that title is not decorative. It is a declaration of lineage that carries the weight of the entire generations. The heavenly demon is the supreme authority of his sect, a figure whose power shapes the political and martial landscape of the world. And Mugeuk, as his son, was raised inside that legacy, trained from childhood, expected to embody the principles, the techniques, the strategic thinking that the heavenly demon's sect demands of its heirs. And Mugeuk excelled, not as a prodigy. Prodigies are gifted with natural talent that makes growth effortless. Mugeuk earned his skill through a discipline that bordered on obsession. His swordsmanship was not flashy, not theatrical, not designed to impress spectators. It was precise, efficient, devastating in its economy. He studied opponents the way a scholar studies texts, with patience, with rigor, with an attention to detail that revealed weaknesses invisible to less careful eyes. He earned the title of the Unrivalled Swordsman not because he was the strongest. He earned it because in a straight duel, he could find the flaw in anyone's technique and exploit it before they knew it existed. He had family. His father, whose strength was legendary but whose wisdom was equally formidable. Siblings who trained alongside him, who challenged him, who made him better through rivalry and camaraderie in equal measure. Friends. Genuine friends forged in the crucible of martial training. People who respected Mugeuk not for his lineage but for his character. A life built on discipline, on loyalty, on the quiet satisfaction of becoming incrementally, measurably better at the thing you have dedicated your existence to. And then Hwa Moogi decided to unify the martial world. The everlasting martial god. The title alone tells you everything you need to know about the scale of the threat. This is not a villain motivated by petty ambition or personal vendetta. Hwa Moogi is a force of nature, a martial artist whose power has transcended the boundaries of what anyone believed possible. His goal is not destruction, it is order, a single unified martial world under a single authority, his authority. The problem, from Mugeuk's perspective, is that unification requires the elimination of every independent power structure that might resist, including the heavenly demon sect, including Mugeuk's family, including everyone Mugeuk has ever known or loved. The war, because that is what it was, a war, was not close. It was a demonstration. Hwa Moogi did not struggle to dismantle the existing order. He dismantled it with the detached efficiency of someone clearing a table. Sects that had stood for centuries fell in days. Masters who had been regarded as untouchable were defeated so decisively that the defeats themselves became cautionary tales. Mugeuk's father fell. His family was scattered and destroyed. His friends were killed in battles they could not win against, an enemy they could not match. And Mugeuk himself, the unrivaled swordsman, the man whose technique was supposed to be flawless, discovered that there is a threshold of raw power beyond which technique becomes irrelevant. Against Hwa Moogi, his precision, his efficiency, his ability to find and exploit weaknesses, none of it mattered because Hwa Moogi had no weaknesses to find. This is the tragedy of the first life. Not that Mugeuk was weak, he was extraordinary. But extraordinary is not enough when your enemy is absolute. After everything was gone, Mugeuk did not despair. Or rather he did, and then he moved past it. Because despair is a luxury only available to people who have no remaining purpose. And Mugeuk had one purpose left, the Great Regression technique. The manhwa does not treat this as a convenient plot device. The technique is not something something Mugeuk stumbles upon or is gifted by a mysterious benefactor. He builds it, piece by piece, material by material, across years of solitary, obsessive research conducted in the ruins of the world Hwa Moogi created. He gathers rare components, studies forbidden texts, consults the remnants of knowledge left behind by destroyed sects. The technique is an achievement of intellect and willpower that is, in its own way, as impressive as any martial feat in the story. And when it is complete, when Mugeuk has assembled every component, verified every calculation, and accepted that this technique will either work or it will kill him, and he is at peace with either outcome, he activates it. He returns to the past, to the beginning, now. Here is where Absolute Regression distinguishes itself from the dozens of other regression manhwa on the market. Because when Mugeuk opens his eyes in his younger body, he does not immediately begin power leveling. He does not rush to acquire legendary items or secret techniques that he knows the locations of. He does not start accumulating strength at a pace that would be impossible for someone without foreknowledge. He sits, he thinks, and he plans. And this is the core of the entire manhwa. The title may promise 100 times stronger. The clickbait writes itself. But what Mugeuk actually brings back from his first life is not power, it is understanding. He understands the political landscape that led to Hwa Moogi's rise. He understands the alliances that failed and why they failed. He understands the technical weaknesses in his own swordsmanship that he was too arrogant to see the first time around. He understands the character of the people around him, who can be trusted, who will betray, who will fold under pressure, and who will hold. His advantage is not that he is stronger, it is that he has already lost the chess match once, and he remembers every move. The early arcs of Mugeuk's second life are a masterclass in strategic patience. He has returned to a time when the heavenly demon sect is intact, when his father is alive, when his friends are young and untested and have no idea what is coming. He has knowledge that could save every single person he lost the first time, and he cannot use it, not directly, not yet, because the martial world is a web of competing interests, and pulling one thread too aggressively will alert the very person he needs to remain unaware of him. Hwa Moogi is not yet the everlasting martial god. He is a rising power, certainly, formidable, respected, and feared by those perceptive enough to see his trajectory, but he is not yet consolidated. He has not yet become unstoppable, and the window between dangerous and invincible is the only window Mugeuk has. So Mugeuk plays a different game. He trains, but differently. He corrects the technical flaws in his swordsmanship that his first life revealed, blind spots he didn't know he had, habits that created patterns a sufficiently skilled opponent could read and exploit. He doesn't just make himself better, he makes himself unpredictable. He incorporates techniques and principles from sects and styles he encountered during the war, blending them into a sword art that no one in this timeline has ever seen because it draws from a future that hasn't happened. But his real work is political. He builds relationships, not the surface level alliances of martial convenience, genuine connections with people he knows will be critical when the conflict comes. He approaches individuals who, in the first timeline, were enemies or neutrals, and he cultivates them. Not through manipulation. Mugeuk is too direct for manipulation, but through demonstrated competence and earned trust. He identifies the fault lines. In his first life, the martial world fractured because its power structures were competitive rather than cooperative. Sects distrusted each other. Masters hoarded techniques. The heavenly demon sect, for all its strength, was isolated by its reputation and its arrogance. When Hwa Moogi moved against them, no one came to help, not because they supported Moogi, but because they calculated that the heavenly demon's fall would benefit them. They were strong. Hwa Moogi came for everyone, but by the time the remaining sects understood that, it was too late to unite against him. Mugeuk's strategic objective is not to become stronger than Hwa Moogi. He tried that in the first life and it was insufficient. His objective is to ensure that when the confrontation comes, the martial world stands together instead of falling apart. He is not building a sword, he is building an army. And he is doing all of this while maintaining the appearance of being exactly what everyone expects, the second son of the heavenly demon, talented but unremarkable, devoted to his training, loyal to his sect, a young man whose future is more important but not urgent. The deception is exhausting. He carries the weight of an entire lifetime of trauma inside a body that hasn't experienced any of it yet. He sits across from his living father and must resist the urge to warn him. He trains beside friends who are going to die and must focus on preventing their deaths through long-term strategy rather than immediate intervention. He encounters people who betrayed him in the first timeline and must treat them as allies because in this timeline, the betrayal hasn't happened and might not if he plays his hand correctly. The psychological burden of regression is something many manhwa acknowledge, but few truly explore. Absolute Regression makes it central. Mugeuk is not a triumphant time traveler enjoying his second chance. He is a traumatized veteran inhabiting the body of a young man surrounded by ghosts who are still alive, playing a game whose stakes are the survival of everyone he has already watched die once. Now let me talk about Hwa Moogi, because this story rises or falls on the quality of its antagonist, and Hwa Moogi is exceptional. The everlasting martial god is not evil. I want to be clear about that, because it changes the shape of the conflict entirely. He does not destroy for pleasure. He does not conquer for vanity. He has looked at the martial world, centuries of factional warfare, power struggles, betrayals, innocent people caught between competing sects, and he has arrived at a conclusion that is, from a certain angle, entirely rational. The martial world is broken. It will remain broken as long as power is fragmented, and the only path to peace is unification, and the unification requires a singular, unchallengeable authority, him. His conviction is genuine, his vision is coherent, and his power is sufficient to execute it. That is what makes him terrifying. Not madness, not cruelty, but certainty backed by capability. He is a man who believes he is saving the world, and he is strong enough that no one can convince him otherwise. Mugeuk's strategic approach is designed to counter precisely this kind of opponent. Raw power cannot defeat Hwa Moogi. The first life proved that conclusively. Mugeuk's plan depends on coalition, on unity, on presenting Moogi with a combined resistance that exceeds even his extraordinary capabilities. But Moogi is not stupid. He is in fact brilliant, a martial genius, whose understanding of combat transcends technique and enters the realm of philosophy. He reads people. He anticipates alliances. He understands the political dynamics of the martial world better than anyone, except possibly the man who has lived through its destruction once already. This creates a dynamic that elevates the entire story. Mugeuk and Moogi are not fighting with swords, not yet. They are fighting with positioning, with influence, and with the slow accumulation of advantage that precedes any physical conflict. Mugeuk builds alliances. Moogi disrupts them. Mugeuk cultivates trust. Moogi plants suspicion. Mugeuk moves a piece on the board, and Moogi responds with a counter that demonstrates a strategic awareness that makes Mugeuk wonder, not for the first time, whether his foreknowledge is actually sufficient against an opponent this intelligent. The chess game energy is relentless. Every chapter advances the position by a single move. Every interaction between secondary characters carries implications for the larger conflict. The Manhwa trusts its readers to track multiple strategic threads simultaneously, and it rewards that attention with payoffs that are intellectually satisfying in a way that pure action cannot replicate. I have covered a significant number of regression manhwa on this channel. It is one of the most reliable subgenres in the media. The fantasy of getting a second chance, of knowing what mistakes to avoid, of transforming tragedy into triumph, it resonates because everyone has regrets, and the idea of undoing them is universally appealing. But most regression stories make the same mistake. They treat foreknowledge as power. The protagonist returns to the past, and because they know where the legendary sword is buried, or which dungeon contains the rare skill book, or who the secret traitor is, they accelerate through challenges that took them years the first time. The tension evaporates because the outcome is never in doubt. The protagonist knows the answers. They are replaying a game they have already beaten. Absolute Regression understands that foreknowledge is not an answer. It's a starting position, and the opponent gets to move too. Mugeuk's knowledge of the future is valuable, but it is also static. It reflects on a timeline that he is actively working to change. Every successful intervention, every alliance formed, every death prevented, every political relationship reconfigured alters the landscape, and those alterations cascade. Butterfly effects compound. The further Mugeuk moves from the original timeline, the less reliable his foreknowledge becomes. He knows what Hwa Moogi did the first timeline. He does not know what Hwa Moogi will do when confronted with a martial world that is responding differently than expected. And Mugi's adaptability, his ability to read new situations and respond with devastating precision, means that Mugeuk cannot rely on scripted responses to scripted events. He must think constantly in real time. This creates genuine tension in a subgenre that often lacks it. Mugeuk is not playing a solved game. He is playing a game whose opening moves he understands, but whose mid-game and endgame are increasingly unpredictable. The character work amplifies this. Mugeuk's relationship with his father, his allies, and his eventual opponents are layered with an emotional complexity that most regression stories cannot achieve, because Mugeuk is experiencing these relationships for the second time. He knows how they end, or how they ended in a timeline that may no longer apply. He grieves for people who are standing in front of him, alive and healthy. He distrusts people whose betrayals haven't happened yet. He loves people who don't understand why this young man looks at them with a depth of feeling that his years shouldn't explain. The author, Jang Young-hun, earns every emotional beat. There are no shortcuts, no flashbacks that do the work for the reader. The emotion lives in the present tense of Mugeuk's interactions, in the way he hesitates before answering a question his father asked him 20 years ago, in the way he watches a friend train and sees, superimposed over the young man in front of him, the corpse he found on a battlefield that exists only in his memory. The art by Nara Yeo deserves recognition as well. The martial sequences are kinetic and beautifully composed, but the quieter panels are where the real artistry lives. Mugeuk's expressions when he is alone, the way his posture shifts between the confident young swordsman everyone sees and the exhausted, grief-stricken veteran he actually is. Absolute Regression is available on Webtoon, where it updates on Saturdays, and on Nutva Series, where it has been running since October 2022. Fan translations are available through Asura Scans. It is ongoing and showing no signs of slowing down. If you are tired of regression stories where the protagonist simply speedruns their way to invincibility, if you want a story where the second chance is not a shortcut but a different kind of challenge, where strategy matters more than raw power, and where the antagonist is intelligent enough to make foreknowledge feel like a starting position rather than a cheat code, this is the manhwa you have been waiting for. Geom Mugeuk is not becoming 100 times stronger, he is becoming 100 times wiser, and in a world where the strongest already exists, wisdom is the only weapon that matters. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know in the comments. Manhwa Recap Vault covers the most compelling stories in the genre every week. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next one. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next recap.